Welcome to Meet Patel Audiobooks. If you enjoyed, consider subscribing. Let's begin. Welcome to Meet Patel Audiobooks. If you enjoyed, consider subscribing. Let's begin.
Chapter 61A. Circumflex Euro's departure. The invitation sat on Ethan's desk for nearly a week, not because he was undecided. The decision had already been made. He was going. The International Medical Summit represented an opportunity too valuable to ignore. What occupied his thoughts was something else entirely. For the first time in his life, he would be leaving the kingdom. The realization felt strange. For years, his world had been small. Medical school, St. Rowan Community Hospital, Westbridge Medical Center, Kingdom Surgical Championship. Every major milestone had happened within familiar borders. Now he was preparing to step into an entirely different world. One filled with doctors who had never heard of St. Rowan. Doctors who wouldn't care about national championships. Doctors who might be better than him. Much better. 3 weeks before departure, Ethan's routine became even more intense. His mornings belonged to Westbridge. His afternoons belonged to research. His evenings belonged to the surgical simulation system. Sleep became a luxury. Free time became a memory. Yet he didn't complain, because for the first time, the system felt difficult again. Truly difficult. The international training simulations exposed weaknesses Ethan hadn't realized existed. Different surgical protocols, different emergency systems, different treatment philosophies. Some countries prioritized speed, others emphasized precision, others relied heavily on technology. Again and again, Ethan failed. Again and again, he adapted. One evening, after another exhausting simulation session, a notification appeared. International adaptation score, 58%. He stared at the number. 58%. Better than before. Still far from enough. A knock on his apartment door interrupted his thoughts. When he opened it, Noah Bennett stood outside carrying 2 coffees. Thought you'd still be awake. Ethan accepted one. You know me too well. Noah entered the apartment and immediately noticed the piles of medical journals scattered across the table. You're becoming annoying. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Why? Because champions are supposed to relax after winning. Instead, Ethan seemed to be working harder than ever. For several moments neither spoke. Then Noah's expression became more serious. The summit is different. Ethan nodded. I know. No, you don't. The answer surprised him. Noah rarely sounded uncertain. My older brother attended 3 years ago. Ethan looked interested. Noah continued. The people there are monsters. That definitely sounded encouraging. They aren't normal residents. Many are already attending physicians. Some completed fellowships before turning 30. The room became quiet. For the first time, Ethan truly understood the scale of what awaited him. This wasn't another resident competition. This wasn't another national event. This was the world stage. Before leaving, Noah stopped at the doorway. Try not to embarrass Westbridge. Ethan laughed. I thought I represented St. Rowan. You represent everyone now. The words lingered long after Noah left, because deep down, Ethan knew they were true. A week later, departure day finally arrived. Westbridge Medical Center had arranged travel for its representatives. The airport felt enormous, busy, crowded, international. Several doctors from other institutions had also gathered there. Some Ethan recognized, others he didn't. Then he noticed a familiar figure near the departure gate. Evelyn Hart. She stood reading something on her tablet, completely focused. For a moment, Ethan considered walking over. Then she looked up and noticed him first. A small smile appeared. Looks like we're taking the same flight. Conversation felt surprisingly natural. The two doctors spent nearly an hour discussing medicine, research, and expectations for the summit. No awkwardness, no pressure, just comfortable conversation. Eventually boarding began. Passengers slowly moved toward the aircraft. As Ethan stepped onto the plane, a familiar notification appeared. Major story arc beginning. International Medical Summit. Difficulty. Unknown. Warning. Global level competitors detected. Potential outcomes. Unpredictable. For several moments, Ethan stared at the message. Then he looked through the aircraft window. The city below slowly disappeared as the plane climbed into the sky. Somewhere beyond the clouds lay new hospitals, new rivals, new mentors, and challenges greater than anything he had faced before. For the first time, since obtaining the surgical simulation system, Ethan genuinely didn't know what would happen next. And strangely enough, that made him smile. Chapter 62A. Circumflex Euros. The world stage. The flight lasted nearly 10 hours. For most passengers, it was simply a long journey. For Ethan, it felt like crossing into another world. As the aircraft descended through the clouds, a massive city appeared below. Endless skyscrapers stretched toward the horizon. High-speed trains moved between districts. Rivers of traffic flowed through streets lined with glass towers and modern architecture. This was Helios City, the host city of the International Medical Summit, one of the world's leading centers for medicine, research, and innovation. Even before leaving the airport, Ethan noticed the difference. The scale was larger. The pace was faster. The diversity was incredible. People from dozens of countries moved through the terminals speaking languages he didn't recognize. For the first time in years, he felt completely out of place. Beside him, Evelyn Hart seemed far less affected. You look nervous, she said as they collected their luggage. I'm observing. Evelyn smiled. That's what doctors say when they're nervous. Unfortunately, she wasn't wrong. A shuttle bus transported summit participants toward the conference district. During the journey, Ethan studied the city through the window. Everywhere he looked, advertisements promoted medical conferences, research institutes, pharmaceutical companies, and biotechnology firms. Medicine wasn't simply a profession here. It was an industry, an ecosystem, an entire world. The summit headquarters occupied a massive complex near the city center. The facility included conference halls, simulation centers, research laboratories, and educational centers all connected into a single campus. Ethan had never seen anything like it. The registration process took nearly an hour. Hundreds of participants filled the building. Young doctors, researchers, surgeons, and specialists from around the globe waited in line. When Ethan finally received his identification badge, he looked down and froze. Ethan Vale, Kingdom Representative. The words felt heavier than expected. Back home, he represented himself. Here, he represented an entire nation. That responsibility settled heavily on his shoulders. Later that afternoon, participants gathered inside the main auditorium. The room was enormous. Thousands of seats filled the hall. Giant display screens hung from the ceiling. Simultaneous translation systems allowed attendees from different countries to communicate effortlessly. As Ethan looked around, he realized something unsettling. Many participants appeared older than him, much older. Several were already attending physicians. Others possessed years of clinical experience. Some had published more research papers than entire departments back home. A familiar notification suddenly appeared. International competitor analysis initiated. Warning. Global talent density extremely high. That wasn't reassuring. The opening ceremony began moments later. A world-famous trauma surgeon stepped onto the stage. Even Ethan recognized the name. Professor Alexander Morgan, one of the most respected trauma specialists on the planet. His textbooks were used in medical schools worldwide. His research had changed international trauma guidelines. The audience immediately fell silent. For nearly an hour, Professor Morgan discussed the future of medicine, artificial intelligence, advanced surgical robotics, personalized treatments, global medical collaboration. The presentation was fascinating and intimidating because the future he described seemed decades ahead of what Ethan had experienced. After the ceremony ended, attendees dispersed throughout the complex. Networking sessions began. Research exhibitions opened. Workshops started. The entire campus buzzed with activity. While exploring the research hall, Ethan noticed a crowd gathered around one exhibit. Curious, he approached. A surgical robot stood at the center of the display. Not a concept model, not a prototype, a functioning system. The machine performed delicate surgical movements with incredible precision. Watching it felt surreal. Voice beside him suddenly spoke. Impressive, isn't it? Ethan turned. The speaker was a tall man wearing the summit badge of another country. Late 20s. Confident posture. Calm expression. Kind of person who immediately looked competent. It is, Ethan admitted. The stranger extended his hand. Dr. Adrian Novak. Ethan Vale. Recognition flashed briefly in the other doctor's eyes. Kingdom surgical champion? Ethan blinked. Apparently word traveled faster than expected. Novak smiled. I've heard about you. That should have felt flattering. Instead, it felt dangerous. Because if people already knew his name, then expectations already existed. The conversation lasted only a few minutes before the summit schedule pulled them in different directions. Yet, as Novak disappeared into the crowd, another notification appeared. Important rival detected. Adrian Novak. Country. Federation Alliance. Current threat level, high. Ethan stared at the message, then sighed. Apparently the international rivals were arriving already. As evening approached, he returned to his hotel room overlooking the city skyline. Lights stretched endlessly beyond the window. The city seemed alive even after sunset. For several minutes, he stood quietly, taking everything in. Then the surgical simulation system activated. A new notification appeared. International Medical Summit. Phase 1 begins tomorrow. Estimated competitors. 500 plus. Current predicted ranking, unknown. For the first time since obtaining the system, no probability appeared. No percentage. No estimate. Nothing. The system genuinely couldn't predict what would happen. Strangely, Ethan found that exciting. Because tomorrow, he wouldn't be competing against the best young doctors in his kingdom. He would be competing against the best young doctors in the world. And for the first time in a very long time, he felt like an underdog again. Chapter 63a. Circumflex Euros. The first international trial. The first official day of the International Medical Summit began before sunrise. When Ethan arrived at the competition complex, hundreds of participants had already gathered inside the main arena. The atmosphere felt completely different from any event he had attended before. Nobody seemed impressed by titles. Nobody cared about national championships. Every participant had achievements. Every participant had awards. Every participant had a reason for being there. For the first time since arriving at Westbridge, Ethan wasn't special. He was simply another competitor. The realization was strangely refreshing. The opening challenge was revealed shortly after 8 o'clock. Global clinical assessment. A giant screen displayed the rules. 500 participants. 300 clinical cases. Only the top 100 would advance. The room immediately became silent. Ethan frowned. This elimination rate was far harsher than anything he had experienced before. The assessment began. Case after case appeared on the computer screen. Rare diseases, complex diagnoses, emergency situations, multi-system disorders. Many involved conditions Ethan had never encountered during residency. Several cases required knowledge far beyond trauma surgery. For hours he worked without stopping, analyzing symptoms, reviewing imaging, choosing treatments, eliminating incorrect answers. The challenge tested not only knowledge but adaptability, exactly what the surgical simulation system had been preparing him for. By the time the assessment ended, Ethan felt mentally exhausted. The results would be announced that evening. Until then, all participants could only wait. As he exited the testing hall, he spotted Adrian Novak standing nearby. The international doctor smiled. How'd it go? Ask me after the results. Novak laughed. Fair answer. The conversation lasted only a minute before both headed toward separate workshops. Yet Ethan couldn't ignore the feeling that he would be seeing a lot more of Adrian Novak in the future. That evening, the rankings finally appeared. The giant display lit up. 100 names. 100 survivors. Ethan scanned the list, then froze. Rank 27. Ethan Vale. Kingdom representative. A wave of relief washed over him. Not only had he advanced, he had placed inside the top 30. For the first time, people around him began paying attention. The unknown doctor from a small kingdom had survived, and the competition was only beginning. End of Chapter 63. The Surgical Simulation System. Chapter 64. A Circumflex Euros. Giants among giants. The second day focused on practical medicine. Unlike the previous assessment, this challenge required direct interaction. Real patients, real simulations, real decisions. The remaining competitors were divided into groups of 20. Each group entered advanced simulation wards designed to replicate actual hospitals. Ethan quickly realized something. The level here was terrifying. Participants moved with incredible confidence. Several doctors performed procedures he had only read about. Others diagnosed conditions within seconds. One competitor from Northern Europe identified a rare autoimmune disorder after only a brief patient interview. Another from the Pacific Federation solved a complicated neurological case in less than 5 minutes. Watching them felt almost unreal. For the first time since obtaining the surgical simulation system, Ethan felt genuinely pressured, not because he lacked ability, because everyone else was also exceptional. A familiar notification appeared. Warning, multiple elite competitors detected. Current ranking potential. Top 20. The system wasn't trying to encourage him, it was warning him. During one scenario, Ethan worked alongside Adrian Novak and 2 other international doctors. Their task involved a critically injured patient following a major vehicle collision. Trauma medicine. Finally, something familiar. As the scenario unfolded, Ethan immediately noticed internal bleeding indicators that others missed. He spoke up. The team adjusted their treatment plan. Minutes later, imaging confirmed his suspicion. The correct diagnosis saved valuable time. Several participants looked impressed, including Adrian. You really are a trauma specialist. Ethan smiled. And you're surprisingly annoying. Adrian laughed loudly. For the first time since arriving at the summit, Ethan relaxed slightly. Not every competitor was an enemy. Some could become friends. The realization surprised him, because until now, his world had always revolved around competition. Perhaps international medicine was different. Perhaps it was larger than that. That evening, rankings updated again. Ethan climbed from 27th to 18th. The improvement shocked him. Apparently his trauma experience remained valuable even at the international level. For the first time, a dangerous thought entered his mind. Maybe he actually belonged here. Chapter 65 at Circumflex Euros, the surgeon from Zurich. On the third day, the summit introduced a new challenge. Surgical planning and strategy. Unlike direct operations, competitors would analyze complicated surgical cases and develop complete treatment plans. The challenge favored experience, something Ethan still lacked. As participants gathered inside the strategy hall, whispers spread throughout the room. A particular competitor had arrived. Someone famous, even internationally. Curious, Ethan followed the attention. A woman entered the hall carrying a stack of medical documents, approximately 28 years old, sharp eyes, confident posture, completely focused. Her summit badge displayed a name, Dr. Isabella Weiss, Zurich International Medical Institute. The reaction around the room immediately caught Ethan's attention. Several competitors recognized her. Some looked nervous, others looked impressed. Adrian Novak appeared beside him. You know who that is? Ethan shook his head. Adrian looked genuinely surprised. She's one of the youngest cardiothoracic surgeons in Europe. That certainly sounded impressive. Adrian continued. Published over 40 papers. Ethan nearly choked. 40? At 28? That was absurd. A system notification appeared instantly. Elite global competitor detected. Isabella Weiss. Threat level. Extremely high. Current success probability against opponent. 32%. For once, the number wasn't terrible, which somehow felt even more dangerous. The challenge began shortly afterward. Complex surgical cases appeared one after another. Heart surgery, vascular reconstruction, multi-organ trauma, transplant planning. The difficulty level was unlike anything Ethan had experienced. Hours passed. Mistakes accumulated. Lessons followed. Despite the pressure, Ethan gradually adapted. The surgical simulation system had trained him to learn quickly. That ability now became his greatest weapon. When the final evaluations were released, Ethan placed 12th overall, just outside the top 10. Close enough to see the summit's strongest competitors. Close enough to challenge them, yet still far enough to understand the gap. That night, as he returned to his hotel room, another golden notification appeared. International growth milestone achieved. Global recognition status. Emerging. New main rival confirmed. Isabella Weiss. Ethan stared at the message for several moments, then laughed. A few months ago, becoming a good surgeon had been his dream. Now he was competing against some of the world's most talented doctors. The journey felt impossible, and somehow, it was only getting started. Chapter 66, a Circumflex Euros, the Trauma King. The fourth day of the International Medical Summit focused on trauma medicine. The moment the announcement appeared on the main screen, Ethan immediately noticed the reactions around him. Some competitors looked excited, others looked worried. A few appeared completely confident. For Ethan, however, the challenge felt different. For the first time since arriving at the summit, the competition centered around his strongest specialty, trauma surgery, the field he had spent countless hours studying, the field Professor Adrian Cross had trained him in, the field where the surgical simulation system had invested hundreds of simulation hours. The challenge took place inside an advanced simulation center containing dozens of trauma bays. Each participant would manage multiple emergency patients simultaneously. Critical injuries, time pressure, limited resources, unexpected complications, everything a trauma surgeon feared, everything Ethan had trained for. When the challenge began, chaos erupted immediately. Patients arrived continuously, a collapse lung, internal bleeding, traumatic brain injury, severe fractures, massive blood loss. Many competitors struggled to keep pace. The pressure was relentless, yet Ethan felt strangely calm. For the first time in days, he wasn't adapting. He wasn't learning. He was operating inside familiar territory. A critically injured patient arrived with unstable vital signs. Most participants focused on visible injuries. Ethan focused on the hidden danger. Internal hemorrhage. Minutes later, imaging confirmed his suspicion. Another scenario involved multiple trauma victims arriving simultaneously. Instead of treating the loudest patient first, Ethan prioritized according to survival probability, exactly as Professor Cross had taught him. The decisions weren't flashy, they were correct. By the end of the challenge, competitors looked exhausted. The results appeared shortly afterward. The auditorium became silent. Rankings updated. 12th, 9th, 7th. Then Ethan saw his name. Rank 5. A wave of surprise spread through the room. The unknown kingdom representative had entered the top 5 internationally. Even Adrian Novak looked impressed. Okay, he shook his head. You're actually terrifying when trauma cases appear. Ethan laughed. Best compliment I've received all week. A system notification appeared. Specialization recognition achieved. International trauma ranking. Top 5. Professor Cross legacy bonus activated. For the first time since arriving at the summit, Ethan felt genuine confidence. Maybe he truly belonged here. End of Chapter 66. The Surgical Simulation System. Chapter 67. A Circumflex Euros. The Emergency. At midnight. The summit organizers had planned many things. A real emergency wasn't one of them. At nearly midnight, alarms suddenly echoed throughout the convention complex. At first, most participants assumed it was a drill. Then security personnel began running. Medical staff rushed toward the lower levels. The atmosphere changed instantly. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Rumors spread quickly. A tour bus carrying summit guests had collided with a cargo vehicle near the conference district. Multiple injuries. Dozens of casualties. Nearby hospitals were already overwhelmed. The summit organizers requested volunteer physicians. Immediately, hundreds stepped forward, including Ethan. Within minutes, emergency treatment stations were established inside the convention center. The transformation happened so quickly it felt surreal. Competition disappeared. Medicine remained. Patients arrived continuously. Blood, broken bones, head injuries, shock, fear. For several hours, every available doctor worked without rest. No rankings, no scores, no trophies, only patients, only lives. Ethan moved from one treatment station to another. Assessments, procedures, stabilization, transfers, the same work he performed every day at Westbridge. Yet something felt different. Doctors from dozens of countries worked side by side. Different languages, different training systems, different backgrounds. Yet everyone understood the same thing. The patient came first. At 3 a.m, a critical patient arrived, a young woman with severe internal injuries. Her condition deteriorated rapidly. Several doctors discussed treatment options. Valuable minutes passed. Then Ethan stepped forward. His trauma instincts activated immediately. He recognized the pattern, the hidden bleeding, the danger, the urgency. After a brief discussion, the team followed his recommendation. Emergency intervention began. The patient's condition stabilized. Lives were saved. And for the first time, several international doctors looked at Ethan differently. Not as a competitor, as a colleague, as a trauma surgeon. The distinction mattered. When dawn finally arrived, exhaustion covered every face. The emergency was over. Most patients had survived, and somewhere during the night, competition had become secondary. End of Chapter 67. The Surgical Simulation System. Chapter 68. A Circumflex Euros. The world notices. The following morning, Ethan expected the summit schedule to continue normally. Instead, the entire atmosphere had changed. The bus accident response dominated every conversation. Doctors discussed treatment decisions, emergency protocols, patient outcomes, stories from the night before, and unexpectedly, Ethan's name appeared often, far more often than he liked. During breakfast, he noticed several unfamiliar participants looking in his direction. Others nodded politely as they passed. One even stopped to introduce himself. The attention felt strange. After all, he hadn't done anything extraordinary. He had simply done his job. Later that day, the summit hosted a special emergency medicine review session. Participants who contributed significantly during the crisis were invited to attend. Ethan's name appeared on the list. So did Adrian Novik's. So did Isabella Weiss's. For the first time, the 3 international rivals sat in the same room. The discussion lasted several hours. Case reviews, decision analysis, patient outcomes, professional debate. It was fascinating and intimidating because Isabella Weiss truly was extraordinary. Her understanding of complex surgical planning seemed almost effortless. Yet surprisingly, she wasn't arrogant. In fact, she appeared genuinely interested whenever others shared ideas. At one point, she even asked Ethan about trauma management protocols used at Westbridge. The conversation lasted nearly 50 minutes, long enough for Adrian Novik to later joke about it. Congratulations. Ethan looked confused. For what? Adrian grinned. You survived a conversation with Isabella Weiss. Apparently that was considered an achievement. That evening, summit rankings updated again. The emergency response had influenced evaluations. Participants gathered around the display. The list appeared. Top 10, top 8, top 6. Then Ethan found his name. Rank 3. The room became quiet. Third, internationally, against some of the best young doctors in the world. For several seconds, Ethan simply stared. A golden notification appeared. Major milestone achieved. Global top 3 ranking. Current international reputation. Rising. Elite rival relationship updated. Isabella Weiss, a Circumflex Euros respect established. Adrian Novik, a Circumflex Euros friendship established. Ethan smiled. The summit wasn't over. The hardest challenges still remained. Yet for the first time since arriving, the world had started paying attention. And somewhere deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning of a much larger story. Chapter 69. A. Circumflex Euros. The top 3. The updated rankings spread throughout the summit within hours. Ethan Vale. Rank 3. International Medical Summit. The achievement shocked many participants. Not because Ethan lacked ability, but because very few people had expected a representative from a relatively small kingdom to outperform competitors from the world's largest medical institutions. As Ethan walked through the convention center the following morning, he immediately noticed the difference. People recognized him. Conversations paused when he entered rooms. Participants greeted him by name. The attention felt strange. A few months ago, nobody outside St. Rowan Community Hospital knew who he was. Now doctors from dozens of countries knew his name. The transition felt unreal. The day's challenge focused on leadership, not surgery, not diagnosis. Leadership. A massive simulation environment had been constructed inside the summit complex. Participants would manage complete hospital departments during a large scale medical crisis. Resources, staffing, emergency response, interdepartmental coordination. Everything would be evaluated. The challenge worried Ethan. Leadership had never been his greatest strength. Technical medicine felt easier, more predictable. People were complicated. Hospitals were even worse. Before the challenge began, Isabella Weiss approached him. The internationally renowned surgeon appeared calm as always. You look concerned. Ethan laughed. That obvious? A little. He glanced toward the simulation center. Leadership isn't exactly my specialty. Isabella considered that for a moment. Then she surprised him. Good. Ethan blinked. What? She smiled slightly. People who think they're natural leaders doctors are usually terrible leaders. Before he could respond, she walked away, leaving Ethan thoroughly confused. The challenge began moments later. Chaos erupted immediately. Multiple emergencies, equipment shortages, communication failures, staff conflicts. Every problem seemed designed to overwhelm participants. Several competitors attempted to control everything personally. Most failed. Ethan nearly made the same mistake. Then he remembered something Professor Cross once said. A surgeon who tries to do everything eventually does nothing well. Instead of controlling every detail, Ethan focused on priorities. Critical patients, resource allocation, team communication, delegation, strategy work. Not perfectly, but effectively. Hours later, the simulation ended. The rankings updated shortly afterward. Lucas Sterling remained first. Isabella Weiss remained second. Ethan remained third. For now, the gap between competitors had become incredibly small. The final challenge was approaching, and everyone knew it. End of Chapter 69. The Surgical Simulation System. Chapter 70. A Circumflex Euros. The Final Rivals. Only 3 days remained before the summit finals. 3 days before one participant would be declared the summit's top young physician. The atmosphere throughout the convention center had changed dramatically. Friendships still existed. Conversations still happened, but beneath everything lay competition. Every participant understood the stakes. The summit champion would receive opportunities unavailable to ordinary doctors. Research grants, international fellowships, elite mentorships, global recognition. The rewards extended far beyond a trophy. That afternoon, the summit hosted a special panel discussion featuring the top 5 competitors. Ethan found himself seated beside Isabella Weiss and Lucas Sterling. The experience felt surreal. Only months ago, he had admired doctors like these from a distance. Now he sat beside them as an equal competitor. The panel covered multiple topics: trauma medicine, research, medical ethics, future healthcare systems. Each participant answered questions from judges and audience members. Lucas Sterling impressed everyone with his confidence. Years of experience showed in every answer. Isabella Weiss demonstrated extraordinary depth of knowledge. Complex topics seemed effortless for her. Then Ethan's turn arrived. A judge asked a simple question: what is the most important quality for a surgeon? The audience expected technical answers. Skill, knowledge, precision, experience, said Ethan thought about St. Rowan, Westbridge, Professor Cross, the patients he had treated, the mistakes he had survived, the lessons he had learned. Then he answered, humility. The room became quiet. Ethan continued, medicine changes constantly. New techniques appear. New research emerges. New knowledge develops. He paused briefly. The moment a doctor believes they've learned everything is the moment they stop improving. Several judges nodded. Even Lucas appeared thoughtful. After the discussion ended, participants slowly dispersed. As Ethan prepared to leave, Lucas Sterling approached him. The defending kingdom champion studied him for several seconds. Then he smiled. You're better than I expected. Coming from Lucas Sterling, that sounded remarkably close to praise. Ethan smiled. So are you. Lucas laughed. Good answer. The conversation lasted only a few minutes, yet it marked something important. Respect, not rivalry, not hostility. Respect. That evening, the surgical simulation system activated. A golden notification appeared. Final summit stage approaching. Remaining elite rivals: Lucas Sterling, Isabella Weiss, Ethan Vale. Projected outcome: unknown. For several moments, Ethan stared at the screen. Unknown. The same word appeared again. No probabilities, no predictions, no estimates. The system genuinely couldn't determine what would happen. For the first time since obtaining it, Ethan stood completely on his own. No guarantees, no guidance. Only his skills, only his experience, only himself. Strangely enough, that felt perfect. Finals were coming, and Ethan was ready. Chapter 71: A Circumflex Euros. The Summit Finals. The final day of the International Medical Summit arrived beneath clear skies. From the windows of his hotel room, Ethan could see the morning sunlight reflecting from the glass towers of Helios City. The sight should have been calming. It wasn't. The day would decide everything. Months of preparation, years of study, countless hours inside the surgical simulation system. All of it had led to this moment. After a quick breakfast, Ethan made his way to the summit complex. Security around the venue had increased dramatically. Journalists waited outside the main entrance. Medical organizations from around the world had sent representatives. The finals were no longer simply a competition. They were an international event. Inside the competitor lounge, Ethan found Isabella Weiss reviewing patient cases on a tablet. Lucas Sterling sat nearby reading research papers. Neither appeared nervous. Ethan found that slightly annoying. Then again, both were among the best young physicians in the world. Perhaps this level of pressure felt normal to them. Shortly afterward, organizers called the finalists into the main arena. The audience filled every seat. Thousands of doctors, researchers, and medical leaders watched from the stands. The atmosphere felt electric. A giant display illuminated above the stage. International Medical Summit Finals. The challenge was finally revealed. Global Crisis Response Simulation. The room immediately became quiet. This wasn't a surgical challenge. It wasn't a research challenge. It wasn't a leadership challenge. It was everything combined. Each finalist would manage a major medical crisis affecting an entire city. Emergency response, hospital coordination, surgical management, critical care, resource allocation, public communication. Every aspect of medicine would be tested. Ethan's heart raced. This was the largest challenge he had ever faced. The simulation began. Immediately, chaos erupted. A fictional earthquake had devastated a major metropolitan area. Hospitals overflowed with casualties. Infrastructure suffered severe damage. Medical resources became scarce. Thousands of lives depended on every decision. The challenge felt overwhelming, yet strangely familiar. A surgical labyrinth, kingdom championship, the bus accident response. Every experience had prepared him for this moment. Hours passed. One decision followed another. Patients arrived continuously. Complications emerged unexpectedly. Entire hospital systems threatened to collapse. Yet Ethan remained focused, calm, determined. For the first time in the competition, he stopped worry worrying about rankings. Stopped worrying about rivals. Stopped worrying about victory. His attention remained entirely on the patients, exactly where it belonged. When the simulation finally ended, exhaustion hit him like a wave. The finalists sat silently as evaluators reviewed the results. Nobody spoke, nobody moved. Everyone simply waited. The most important results of their careers would soon be announced. End of Chapter 71. The Surgical Simulation System. Chapter 72. A Circumflex Euros, the World Champion. The award ceremony took place that evening. Every participant attended. Every judge attended. Every major medical organization remained present. The atmosphere felt heavier than any competition Ethan had ever experienced. Because this wasn't merely about winning. This was about becoming the best. The giant display activated. Final rankings would be announced one by one. Third place appeared first. The audience applauded immediately. Lucas Sterling, former Kingdom champion, accepted the result with dignity. No disappointment, no frustration, only professionalism. The applause continued for several moments. Then the screen changed. Second place. The room became completely silent. Isabella Weiss. A wave of surprise spread throughout the audience. Even Isabella looked mildly shocked, which meant only one possibility remained. The final screen illuminated. For several seconds, nobody reacted. Then the audience exploded. International Medical Summit Champion, Ethan Vale. For a moment, Ethan thought he had misread the screen. The words didn't seem real. Champion. International champion. The title felt impossible. A year ago, he had been an unknown resident struggling through night shifts at St. Rowan Community Hospital. Now he stood on the largest stage of his life. The audience rose to their feet. Applause thundered throughout the arena. Medical leaders congratulated him. Competitors shook his hand. Journalists rushed forward. Yet through all the noise, Ethan found himself remembering a small community hospital. A tired resident. A mystery. A system. A dream. Nothing more. A golden notification appeared before his eyes. Major story arc complete. International Medical Summit. Status cleared. Evaluation score 125. New rank unlocked. World class young physician. Then another notification appeared, one unlike anything he had seen before. Hidden requirement completed. System upgrade available. Ethan stared at the words. Before he could investigate further, the notification disappeared, leaving only questions behind. End of Chapter 72. The Surgical Simulation System. Chapter 73. A Circumflex Euros. The system evolves. 3 days after the summit concluded, Ethan remained in Helios City. The celebration events seemed endless. Interviews, networking sessions, research meetings, professional dinners. The schedule never stopped. Normally, Ethan would have hated it. Yet he understood something important. Opportunities mattered. Relationships mattered. Medicine wasn't practiced alone. One evening, after returning to his hotel room, he finally found time to rest. For the first time in days, silence surrounded him. Naturally, he entered the surgical simulation system. The moment he arrived, something felt different. The familiar training space had changed. The environment appeared larger, more detailed, more advanced. A golden light filled the sky above him. Then a notification appeared. System upgrade initiated. The message remained suspended before his eyes. Several seconds passed. Then the entire world shook. New sections appeared throughout the system interface. Advanced Research Division. International Surgery Center. Medical Innovation Laboratory. Future Medicine Archive. Entirely new areas. Entirely new possibilities. Ethan stared in disbelief. The system had evolved, not improved. Evolved. Another notification appeared. Current user status. Name. Ethan Vale. Rank. World-class young physician. Primary specialty. Trauma surgery. Global influence. Emerging. Next objective. Unknown. For the first time since obtaining the system, no predefined path existed. No obvious challenge. No visible destination. Only possibilities. Then a final notification appeared. Unlike the others, it contained a single sentence. The world's best surgeon has not yet been found. The words lingered before disappearing. Ethan stood alone inside the transformed system. For several minutes he said nothing. Then he smiled. Because after everything he had accomplished, after every competition, after every victory, after every challenge, the journey was still beginning. Somewhere in the world, greater doctors existed, greater hospitals existed, greater challenges existed. And now, a system was preparing him to find them. Chapter 74. A Circumflex Euros. The Future Medicine Archive. 3 days after the system upgrade, Ethan still hadn't explored most of the new areas. Not because he lacked curiosity, because every section seemed enormous. The Advanced Research Division alone contained more material than an entire medical library. The International Surgery Center included surgical procedures he had never heard of. And then there was the most mysterious area of all, the Future Medicine Archive. The name itself sounded impossible. As Ethan stood before the massive golden doors, a familiar notification appeared. Warning, Future Medicine Archive access restricted. Current access level, Beginner. Available sections. 1. Only one section? That immediately caught his attention. The system rarely restricted information. Normally, it encouraged exploration. The fact that access limitations existed suggested the archive contained something important. Very important. After a brief moment of hesitation, Ethan stepped forward. The golden door slowly opened. Inside, he discovered a massive circular library. Countless shelves extended toward the horizon. Floating holographic displays illuminated the air. Medical diagrams rotated slowly above workstations. The place felt less like a library and more like a glimpse into the future. A notification appeared. Future Medicine Archive. Section 1 unlocked. Topic. Precision Trauma Surgery. Ethan frowned. The title sounded familiar, yet the information displayed before him was anything but familiar. Advanced Imaging Systems. AI-assisted surgical planning. Predictive trauma algorithms. Technologies decades beyond what he currently used. At first, he assumed the archive simply stored theoretical concepts. Then he began reading. The research looked real, detailed, practical, scientifically sound. The level of sophistication was astonishing. Hours passed before Ethan finally leaned back from the holographic display. His heart raced, because for the first time, he understood what made the surgical simulation system truly extraordinary. It wasn't merely teaching medicine, it was showing medicine's future. A sudden notification interrupted his thoughts. Emergency news detected. Location. Helios City General Hospital, mass casualty incident. The archive immediately disappeared. Ethan blinked. Mass casualty incident? Without hesitation, he exited the system. A quick search on his tablet confirmed the news. A commuter train derailment had occurred on the outskirts of the city. Multiple injuries. Dozens of casualties. Several major hospitals were requesting additional physicians. The International Medical Summit had officially ended. Most participants were preparing to return home, yet many remained in Helios City, including Ethan. A familiar feeling settled inside him, the same feeling he experienced before every major challenge. Not excitement, not fear. Responsibility. Medicine didn't stop because conferences ended. Patients still needed doctors. Minutes later, his phone rang. The caller ID displayed a familiar name, Adrian Novak. The moment Ethan answered, he heard the international physician speak. "Tell me you're seeing the news." "I am." "Good." A brief pause followed. Then Adrian continued. "I'm heading to Helios General." Ethan smiled slightly. "So am I." The call ended. No further discussion was necessary. Both already understood. This wasn't a competition. It was medicine. 1 hour later, Ethan arrived at Helios City General Hospital. The scene immediately reminded him of the bus accident response. Ambulances lined the entrance. Medical teams moved rapidly. Emergency staff coordinated incoming casualties. Controlled chaos. The language was different. The hospital was different. The country was different. Yet somehow the situation felt familiar. Inside the emergency department, Ethan spotted several recognizable faces. Adrian Novak, Isabella Weiss, and surprisingly, Professor Alexander Morgan, the legendary trauma surgeon from the summit's opening ceremony. For a moment, Ethan wondered whether he was imagining things. Then Professor Morgan turned toward the incoming volunteer doctors. His gaze swept across the room, eventually stopping on Ethan. Recognition appeared briefly. "You were the summit champion." Ethan nodded respectfully. Professor Morgan studied him for a moment, then pointed toward the trauma bays. "Good." His voice remained calm. "Let's see if you can work." The challenge wasn't hostile. It wasn't praise either. It was opportunity. The kind Ethan had spent his entire journey pursuing. As he rushed toward the trauma unit, another notification appeared. Major story arc initiated. Global trauma network. Difficulty. Very high. Primary ment or candidate detected. Professor Alexander Morgan. Ethan's eyes widened. Then he smiled. Because deep down he knew exactly what that meant. The international summit was over. The real journey had just begun. Chapter 75 A Circumflex Euros. The Legends Test. The emergency department at Helios City General Hospital was operating at maximum capacity. Ambulances continued arriving every few minutes. Train derailment had overwhelmed several nearby hospitals, forcing patients to be distributed across the city. Even so, Helios General carried the largest burden. Doctors rushed through crowded corridors. Trauma teams moved from one critical patient to another. Operating rooms remained active without interruption. The entire hospital felt like a battlefield. Ethan immediately joined one of the trauma teams. A 32-year-old male patient had arrived with severe abdominal injuries. His blood pressure continued falling despite aggressive fluid resuscitation. The signs were familiar. Too familiar. Internal bleeding, potential liver involvement, possibly splenic injury. The attending physician reviewed the imaging while Ethan assisted with the assessment. Moments later, the diagnosis was confirmed. Massive internal hemorrhage. Emergency surgery was required immediately. The patient was transferred directly to the operating room. Ethan expected to return to the emergency department. Instead, a voice stopped him. "You're coming with us." He turned. Professor Alexander Morgan stood behind him. The legendary trauma surgeon had somehow appeared without Ethan noticing. For a brief moment, Ethan wondered if he had misheard. "Sir?" Morgan looked unimpressed. "Do you need me to repeat myself?" "No, sir." "Good." The operating room was already being prepared. As Ethan scrubbed in, he noticed several experienced surgeons assembling around the table. Many possessed decades of experience. Several were internationally recognized experts. Compared to them, he felt painfully young. The surgery began moments later. The patient's condition was unstable from the start. Blood loss remained significant. Multiple injuries complicated the procedure. Every minute mattered. Morgan worked with incredible efficiency. His movements were calm, precise, almost effortless. Watching him felt similar to watching Professor Cross for the first time. The difference was scale. Cross was one of the best surgeons in the kingdom. Morgan was one of the best surgeons in the world. Halfway through the operation, complications emerged. The patient's blood pressure suddenly dropped again. A monitor alarm sounded. The atmosphere inside the operating room immediately changed. Several surgeons searched for the source. Additional bleeding had developed somewhere inside the abdomen. Finding it quickly could determine whether the patient survived. For several tense seconds, nobody spoke. Then Ethan noticed something. A small detail, easy to miss. The bleeding pattern seemed unusual. The source wasn't where everyone expected. His pulse accelerated. The room contained some of the most experienced trauma surgeons on the planet. Speaking up felt dangerous, yet hesitation could cost valuable time. He took a breath. "Professor." Morgan didn't look up. "What?" "I think the bleeding is coming from the retroperitoneal space." The room became silent. Several surgeons immediately turned toward Ethan. Morgan remained focused on the patient. For a moment, Ethan wondered if he had made a mistake. Then Morgan extended his hand. Suction. The area was cleared. Several seconds passed. Then the source became visible. A damaged vessel hidden behind surrounding tissue. Exactly where Ethan predicted. One of the surgeons quietly muttered a curse under his breath. Not because Ethan was wrong, because Ethan was right. Morgan controlled the bleeding within moments. The patient's condition gradually stabilized. The crisis passed. Several hours later, the operation finally ended. The patient survived. As the surgical team prepared to leave, exhaustion filled the room. Ethan removed his gloves and prepared to follow everyone out. Then Morgan spoke. "Vale." The room immediately became quiet. Ethan turned. The legendary surgeon studied him for several seconds, long enough to make him uncomfortable. Then Morgan nodded once. Good eyes. Only 2 words. Simple, direct. Yet Ethan understood their significance immediately, because compliments from Professor Alexander Morgan were probably even rarer than compliments from Adrian Cross. After leaving the operating room, Ethan entered a quiet corridor, and leaned against the wall. His heart still raced from the surgery. A golden notification suddenly appeared. ***, major meant, or recognition achieved ***, Alexander Morgan, approval obtained ***, trauma, observation plus 8 ***, advanced surgical awareness plus 5 ***, new path unlocked ***, global trauma fellowship candidate ***. For several moments, Ethan simply stared at the message. Then another line appeared. Professor Alexander Morgan wishes to speak with you tomorrow. Ethan's eyes widened, because deep down he knew exactly what that meant. The real test hadn't happened yet. It would begin tomorrow. Chapter 76, I circumflex euros they offer. The following morning, Ethan arrived at Helios City General Hospital earlier than necessary. Sleep had been difficult, not because of exhaustion, not because of the emergency response, because of a single notification. Professor Alexander Morgan wishes to speak with you tomorrow. The message had remained in his mind all night. Professor Morgan wasn't simply a famous surgeon. He was a living legend, one of the world's leading trauma specialists, a doctor whose research influenced hospitals across continents. The idea that such a person wanted a private conversation felt surreal. As Ethan entered the hospital, a coordinator immediately approached him. Dr. Vale? Yes, Professor Morgan is expecting you. Straight to the point. That somehow made Ethan even more nervous. A few minutes later, he found himself standing outside a private conference room. Taking a slow breath, he knocked. Enter. A familiar voice sounded calm, confident, the voice of a man accustomed to making life and death decisions every day. Ethan stepped inside. The room was surprisingly simple. A large table, several medical journals, a digital display showing trauma statistics. Nothing extravagant, nothing unnecessary. Professor Morgan sat near the window reviewing patient reports. Without looking up, he gestured toward a chair. Sit. Ethan obeyed immediately. For several moments, silence filled the room. Morgan continued reading. The situation felt oddly similar to his first meeting with Professor Cross. Eventually, the legendary surgeon placed the report aside. His attention shifted entirely toward Ethan. I reviewed your competition results. Ethan remained silent. I also reviewed yesterday's surgery. Morgan folded his hands together. Your observation skills are excellent. Coming from anyone else, the statement would have sounded ordinary. Coming from Alexander Morgan, it felt extraordinary. The professor continued. Do you know why most young surgeons fail? The question caught Ethan off guard. He considered several possible answers. Lack of knowledge, lack of discipline, lack of experience. Before he could respond, Morgan answered himself. They stopped learning. The room became quiet. Morgan stood and walked toward the window. Success is dangerous. His voice remained calm. The moment people become successful, they start protecting their reputation. He looked back toward Ethan. They stopped taking risks. They stopped challenging themselves. They stopped growing. The words struck Ethan harder than expected, because he had seen it happen. Doctors who became comfortable. Doctors who relied on past achievements. Doctors who stopped improving. Morgan studied him carefully. You're not there yet. The statement sounded almost like approval. Almost. Then the professor pressed a button on the conference table. A document appeared on the display screen. Ethan's eyes widened. The title immediately caught his attention. Global Trauma Fellowship Program ***. The words alone were enough to accelerate his heartbeat. Morgan noticed his reaction. Have you heard of it? Ethan nodded slowly. Of course he had. Every trauma surgeon had. The Global Trauma Fellowship represented one of the most competitive training programs in the world. Thousands applied. Only a handful were accepted. Graduates often became department chiefs, researchers, and international experts. Simply receiving an interview was considered a major achievement. Morgan continued speaking. I helped select candidates. For a moment, Ethan forgot how to breathe. The implication was obvious. Painfully obvious. Professor walked back to the table. I believe you have potential. Not talent. Not skill. Potential. The distinction mattered. Potential meant unfinished. Potential meant incomplete. Potential meant there was still room to grow. A lot of room. Morgan handed him a folder. Inside were application requirements, training expectations, evaluation criteria. The standards looked terrifying. International publications, advanced clinical performance, leadership evaluations, research achievements. Most applicants possessed years more experience than Ethan, perhaps even a decade. Seeing his expression, Morgan smiled slightly, the first genuine smile Ethan had seen from him. Good. Ethan blinked. Sir, you look intimidated. Professor leaned back in his chair. You should. That wasn't encouraging, yet somehow it motivated him. The conversation continued for another 30 minutes. Trauma systems, research pathways, international medicine, career development. By the time it ended, Ethan's notebook contained pages of observations. As he prepared to leave, Morgan spoke one final time. Vale. Ethan stopped at the door. The professor's expression became serious. Winning competitions is easy. Ethan nearly laughed. Nothing about the summit had been easy, yet he understood the point. Compared to building a lifetime career, competitions were temporary. Building something meaningful is harder. Morgan nodded toward the hallway. Decide what kind of surgeon you want to become. The meeting ended shortly afterward. As Ethan walked through the hospital corridors, his thoughts raced. The summit was over. The championship was over. Yet somehow the challenges ahead looked even larger. A familiar golden notification appeared. ***, major career path unlocked ***, global trauma fellowship ***, eligibility status. Candidate ***, current acceptance probability. 12% ***. Ethan stared at the number. 12%. For some reason he smiled, because every important journey in his life had started with impossible odds, and somehow, that had never stopped him before. Chapter 77 A circumflex euros returned to Westbridge. 2 days later, Ethan stood inside Helios International Airport. The city skyline stretched across the horizon beyond the terminal windows. A week ago, he had arrived as an ambitious young doctor hoping to survive an international competition. Now he was leaving as the International Medical Summit champion. The transformation still felt unreal. Nearby, passengers moved through the terminal carry ing luggage and boarding passes, completely unaware of the significance the journey held for him. For several moments, Ethan remained silent, reflecting. The summit, the emergency response, Professor Alexander Morgan, the Global Trauma Fellowship. Every event seemed connected somehow, as if one chapter of his life had ended, and another had quietly begun. A familiar voice interrupted his thoughts. Thinking too much again? Ethan turned. Evelyn Hart stood nearby holding a travel bag. He smiled. Probably, definitely. She looked toward the departure gate. At least that's consistent. The conversation came easily. It always seemed to. Over the past few weeks, they had spent more time together than ever before, not intentionally, simply because circumstances kept placing them in the same locations, conferences, meetings, flights, emergency responses. The result felt natural, comfortable. Neither seemed eager to acknowledge it. A boarding announcement echoed through the terminal. Passengers immediately began moving toward the gate. The journey home had begun. Several hours later, the aircraft touched down in the kingdom's capital. The moment Ethan exited the airport, his phone exploded with notifications. Messages from Westbridge residents. Messages from former colleagues Edson, Rowan. Messages from people he barely remembered meeting. Apparently, international victories attracted attention. Who knew? By the time he reached Westbridge Medical Center the following morning, news had already spread throughout the hospital. The reaction was immediate. Doctors greeted him. Residents congratulated him. Nurses smiled whenever he walked past. The attention felt overwhelming and slightly embarrassing. Fortunately, Noah Bennett appeared before things became unbearable. The senior resident leaned against a nearby workstation. So, Ethan sighed. So, you disappeared for a few weeks? Yes. You won an international championship. Apparently. Noah narrowed his eyes. I liked you better when you were losing. Ethan laughed. The familiar banter felt refreshing. For the first time in weeks, things seemed normal, at least until another voice interrupted. Vale. The atmosphere immediately changed. Professor Adrian Cross stood at the far end of the hallway. Several residents instantly disappeared. Years of survival instincts activated simultaneously. Cross rarely called people unless something important was happening. Ethan followed him toward the trauma department conference room. The moment they entered, Cross closed the door. Then he placed a file on the table. Ethan frowned. The document carried the seal of the Ministry of Health. Interesting. Very interesting. Cross sat down. Read. Ethan opened the file. His eyes widened almost immediately. The title alone was enough. *** National Trauma Development Initiative ***. Below it appeared a list of hospitals selected to participate. King's Royal Medical Center, Westbridge Medical Center, several other elite institutions. Then Ethan noticed another section. A specialized trauma response team, designed to handle the kingdom's most complex emergencies. The project would receive national funding, national oversight, national attention. His pulse quickened. This wasn't a competition. This was real. A chance to influence healthcare across an entire nation. Cross watched him carefully. What do you think? Ethan looked up. For a moment he wasn't sure how to answer, because deep down he already knew. This opportunity was enormous. Kind of opportunity that could define careers. Cross nodded slightly, as though he had already predicted the response. Good. There was that word again. Good. Apparently mentors everywhere shared the same vocabulary. The trauma chief stood and walked toward the window. Kingdom is changing. His voice remained calm. Medicine is changing. Then he looked directly at Ethan. And you're going to help build what comes next. For several moments, silence filled the room. A golden notification suddenly appeared. *** Major National Arc initiated *** Kingdom Trauma Network *** difficulty extreme *** objective transform national trauma care *** potential impact historic ***. Ethan stared at the message, then slowly smiled, because after international competitions and global recognition, he had expected the next challenge to be somewhere far away. Instead, it was waiting at home, and somehow that made it even more important. Chapter 78 Circumflex Euros, the National Trauma Network. The announcement changed everything. For the next several days, Ethan found himself buried beneath documents, reports, and planning meetings. The National Trauma Development Initiative wasn't simply another medical project. It was a complete restructuring of the kingdom's trauma system. Ambulance networks, emergency departments, regional trauma centers, transfer protocols. Everything would be redesigned. For the first time in his career, Ethan was being exposed to medicine beyond the hospital walls. He wasn't treating individual patients. He was helping design systems that would affect millions. The realization was both exciting and terrifying. One Monday morning, representatives from participating hospitals gathered inside a large government conference center. The room contained some of the most influential people in healthcare: hospital directors, department chiefs, government officials, senior trauma surgeons, researchers, policy experts. Compared to them, Ethan felt young, very young. As he entered the conference hall, several attendees glanced in his direction. Recognition flashed across a few faces. The International Medical Summit had apparently increased his visibility more than he realized. That wasn't necessarily a good thing. Attention created expectations, and expectations created pressure. Professor Cross seemed completely unaffected. The trauma chief walked through the room as if he belonged there, which in many ways he did. Several hospital directors immediately approached him. Conversations began. Discussions followed. Within minutes, Cross had become the center of attention. Ethan wasn't surprised. Leadership attracted attention naturally. First session focused on trauma response times. Data from across the kingdom appeared on large display screens. The statistics were troubling. Patients in major cities received treatment quickly. Patients in rural regions often waited hours. Some never reached specialized centers at all. The room grew quieter as the numbers appeared, because numbers didn't lie, and these numbers told a painful story. Lives were being lost, not because doctors lacked skill, because systems systems lacked efficiency. For several hours, experts debated solutions: more funding, better transportation, additional trauma centers, improved training. Each proposal carried advantages and limitations. Then something unexpected happened. One of the officials pointed toward Ethan. "The summit champion hasn't spoken." The room suddenly became very interested. Ethan immediately wished he had remained invisible. Unfortunately, that option no longer existed. Slowly, he stood. Dozens of eyes focused on him. The pressure felt familiar. Conference presentations, research competitions, international summits. He had experienced moments like this before. The difference was significance. This wasn't a competition. This mattered. After a brief pause, he spoke. "We keep discussing hospitals." The room remained silent. "But patients don't begin inside hospitals." Several attendees leaned forward. Ethan continued. "They begin where the injury occurs." He pointed toward one of the data maps displayed on screen. "Rural regions don't only need faster transportation." His voice remained steady. "They need better early intervention." The discussion immediately shifted. Emergency responders, field triage, mobile trauma units, remote consultation systems. Ideas began flowing throughout the room. One proposal triggered another, then another. For nearly 30 minutes, the conversation evolved. When it finally ended, several officials looked impressed. Others looked thoughtful. Professor Cross said nothing, yet Ethan noticed the slight nod, the same nearly invisible gesture he had seen many times before. The meeting concluded late that evening. As participants prepared to leave, an elderly surgeon approached Ethan. His hair was completely gray. His posture remained perfectly straight, and judging from the reactions around him, he was important. Very important. The man extended a hand. "Ethan Vale." It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir." The surgeon smiled slightly. "My name is Richard Halstead." The name hit Ethan immediately. Richard Halstead, founder of the kingdom's modern trauma system, former Minister of Health, one of the most respected medical figures in the nation's history. For a moment, Ethan forgot how to respond. Halstead noticed. Apparently he found it amusing. "I enjoyed your comments." The words sounded simple, yet coming from someone like Halstead, they carried enormous weight. The older surgeon studied him for a moment. Then he asked a surprising question. "Have you ever considered healthcare leadership?" Ethan blinked. Leadership? The question felt strange. His entire journey had revolved around becoming a better surgeon. Not an administrator. Not a politician. A surgeon. Halstead smiled, as if he had anticipated the reaction. "Most doctors only see the patient in front of them." His gaze shifted toward the conference hall. "Great doctors eventually learn to improve the system itself." The statement lingered long after the conversation ended. Later that night, Ethan entered the surgical simulation system. A golden notification appeared immediately. *** major perspective expansion achieved ****. Healthcare systems, understanding plus 7 ****, leadership plus 4 ****, strategic planning plus 5 ****. Then another notification appeared. ****, new career branch available ****, medical leadership path ****, current compatibility 61%****. Ethan stared at the message, then laughed quietly. Every time he thought he understood his future, the system introduced another possibility, another challenge, another road. Outside his apartment window, the lights of the capital stretched across the horizon. Somewhere within that city, millions of people lived their lives. Most would never know his name. Most would never meet him. Yet, if the National Trauma Network succeeded, their lives could still be affected. And for the first time, Ethan began to understand something important. Saving one patient was meaningful. Building a system that saved thousands might be even more important. Chapter 79A, Circumflex Euros. The Midnight Call. The National Trauma Network project quickly became Ethan's second life. His days remained filled with surgeries, patient rounds, and emergency consultations at Westbridge Medical Center. His evenings disappeared into planning meetings, regional healthcare reports, and trauma response proposals. For the first time since becoming a doctor, Ethan felt stretched between two worlds. One focused on individual patients, the other focused on entire populations. Both mattered, both demanded attention, and both were exhausting. 3 weeks after the initiative began, the project reached its first major milestone. A pilot trauma response network was launched across 3 regions of the kingdom. The goal was simple: reduce treatment delays, improve communication, increase survival rates. The implementation process was anything but simple. Technology systems needed integration. Ambulance services required retraining. Hospitals needed coordination. Every improvement created new challenges. Every solution uncovered another problem. One evening, Ethan remained in the trauma department long after most staff had left. The hospital was unusually quiet, a rare occurrence. He sat alone reviewing regional trauma data while rain tapped gently against the windows. The clock on the wall showed 11:47 p.m. Normally, he would have gone home hours ago. Instead, he found himself comparing emergency response times between urban and rural hospitals. His life had become strange. A sudden knock interrupted his thoughts. Noah Bennett stepped into the office. "Carrie, in 2 coffees." "You're still here." Ethan accepted the cup. "So are you." "There." Noah sat down across from him and glanced at the reports covering the desk. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Noah shook his head. "I still don't understand how you enjoy this." Ethan laughed. "I don't." "Good." Noah looked relieved. "For a moment I thought you were becoming one of those policy people." Conversation continued for several minutes. Simple, relaxed, the kind of conversation only close colleagues could have. Then Ethan's phone rang. The sound immediately broke the atmosphere. He checked the screen. Unknown number. At midnight. Interesting. Very interesting. Ethan answered. "Hello?" The voice on the other end sounded urgent, professional, controlled, yet yet undeniably stressed. "This is Dr. Caroline Hayes from Eastbridge Regional Hospital." Ethan frowned. He recognized the hospital name, a small regional trauma center participating in the pilot network. "How can I help?" The answer came immediately. "We have a problem." That was never a good way to begin a conversation. Dr. Hayes quickly explained the situation. A multi-vehicle highway collision had occurred nearly 40 kilometers outside the city. More than 20 casualties. Several critical injuries. Weather conditions complicated transportation. The nearest major trauma center remained hours away. The local team was overwhelmed. Ethan listened carefully. His expression gradually became serious. Because this wasn't a simulation. This wasn't a planning meeting. This was exactly the type of scenario the National Trauma Network had been created to address. The question was whether the system would actually work. Noah noticed the change immediately. "What happened?" Ethan covered the phone briefly. "Mass casualty incident." Noah stood before the explanation even finished. Some habits never changed. For the next 30 minutes, Ethan coordinated remotely with hospitals, emergency services, and trauma teams. Transfer routes were optimized. Resources were redirected. Specialists were consulted. Communication channels remained active. The process felt remarkably similar to one of the advanced leadership simulations. Except now the consequences were real. Lives depended on every decision. By 2:30 a.m. the situation had stabilized. Most critical patients had been transferred successfully. Emergency surgeries were underway. No additional fatalities had been reported. The immediate crisis had passed. Ethan finally leaned back in his chair. Exhaustion settled over him. Yet beneath the exhaustion lay something else. Relief. The network had worked. Not perfectly, but it had worked. The pilot system had done exactly what it was designed to do. A golden notification suddenly appeared before his eyes. ***, major milestone achieved ***, National Trauma Network pilot success, ***, lives impacted, 27 ***, leadership plus 6 healthcare systems management plus 8 national influence increased Then another notification appeared. One line, simple, powerful, you are no longer only saving patients. For several moments, Ethan stared at the words. Outside, the rain continued falling against the hospital windows. Somewhere beyond the city, doctors continued fighting to save lives. Ambulances continued moving. Hospitals continued working. And for the first time, Ethan understood what Richard Halstead had meant. A great doctor could save hundreds of patients. A great system could save thousands. The realization changed something inside him. Not dramatically, not immediately, but enough, because for the first time, Ethan wasn't only thinking about the next surgery, he was thinking about the future of medicine itself, and that future was beginning to feel much closer than he had ever imagined. Chapter 80A. Circumflex Euros. The Royal Commission. The success of the pilot program spread faster than anyone expected. Within days, reports from Eastbridge Regional Hospital reached the Ministry of Health. Survival rates had improved. Patient transfer times had decreased. Emergency coordination had functioned better than predicted. For the first time, the National Trauma Network was producing measurable results. Real results. Not projections. Not theories. Lives. Following Monday, Ethan arrived at Westbridge Medical Center expecting a normal trauma shift. Instead, he found Professor Cross waiting outside the department conference room. That alone was unusual. Cross rarely waited for anyone. "You're late." Ethan checked his watch. He was 3 minutes early. Apparently that still counted as late. "Sorry, sir." Cross nodded toward the conference room. Inside, the room was already occupied. Hospital administrators, government officials, senior surgeons, several people Ethan didn't recognize. The atmosphere immediately felt serious. Very serious. A large display screen showed maps of the kingdom, regional healthcare statistics, trauma response data, population centers. Ethan quickly realized this wasn't a hospital meeting. It was a national meeting. One of the officials stood as Ethan entered. A woman in her 50s with silver hair and sharp eyes. Minister Elena Ward, the current Minister of Health. Even Ethan recognized her. That couldn't be a good sign. Government ministers generally didn't attend meetings unless something important was happening. Very important. The meeting began shortly afterward. For nearly an hour, officials reviewed data from the pilot network. Every metric exceeded expectations. Emergency response times improved. Inter-hospital communication improved. Patient survival improved. The results spoke for themselves. Then Minister Ward changed the display. A new map appeared. This one covered the entire kingdom, not 3 regions. All of it. The room became quiet. The government has reached a decision. Her voice remained calm, professional, yet everyone immediately paid attention. The National Trauma Network will expand nation-wide. For a moment, nobody reacted. Then conversations erupted throughout the room. Questions, concerns, suggestions. The scale of the announcement was enormous. A nation-wide implementation would affect every major hospital in the kingdom, every ambulance network, every trauma center. The cost alone would be staggering. Yet nobody argued against it. The data was simply too convincing. Eventually the discussion settled. Minister Ward looked directly toward Ethan. That immediately made him uncomfortable. The recommendation for expansion originated from this project team. She paused briefly. Several of those recommendations came from Dr. Ethan Vale. The room turned toward him. Again, this was becoming a recurring problem. The minister smiled slightly. "Well done, doctor." Compliment felt nice. The attention did not. Fortunately, the meeting moved on before Ethan had to respond. Hours later, after the session ended, participants slowly left the conference center. Ethan expected the day to be over. He was wrong. As he prepared to leave, an assistant approached. "Dr. Vale?" "Yes." The minister would like a private word. Of course she would, because apparently life wasn't complicated enough already. A few minutes later, Ethan entered a smaller conference room. Minister Ward sat alone reviewing documents. Without looking up, She gestured toward a chair. The similarity to meetings with Cross and Morgan was becoming concerning. Important people apparently shared the same habits. After several moments, the minister finally spoke. "You're younger than I expected." Ethan wasn't sure whether that was a compliment. "I hear that a lot." That earned a brief smile. Then her expression became serious. "Kingdom needs doctors who understand both medicine and systems." Her gaze met his. "Those people are rare." Ethan remained silent. Something told him she wasn't making casual conversation. Ward continued, "Most doctors focus on patients. Most administrators focus on policies." She folded her hands. "Very few people understand both." The conversation lasted nearly 40 minutes. Healthcare strategy, emergency infrastructure, medical leadership, topics Ethan had never imagined discussing a year ago. Eventually, the minister handed him a folder. The seal on the cover immediately caught his attention. Royal Commission for National Healthcare Development. His heartbeat accelerated. The title alone sounded important. Dangerously important. Ward noticed. "Relax." Ethan doubted that was possible. The minister smiled. "It's only an advisory position." Only, as if joining a Royal Healthcare Commission was completely normal. Before leaving, she had offered one final piece of advice. "The future of medicine isn't only in operating rooms." The words reminded him of Richard Halstead, of Professor Morgan, of every mentor who seemed determined to broaden his perspective. Perhaps they all saw something he didn't. Later that evening, Ethan entered the surgical simulation system. A brilliant golden notification immediately appeared. ***, major national recognition achieved ***, Royal Healthcare Commission invitation ***, leadership plus 10 ***, national influence plus 8 ***, strategic vision plus 6 ***. Then another notification appeared, one that caused Ethan to freeze. ***, hidden career path updated ***, master trauma surgeon. 87% ***, medical leadership path. 79% healthcare architect path. 65% ***. For several moments, Ethan stared at the screen. 3 paths, 3 futures, 3 different versions of the person he could become. The realization felt strangely intimidating, because for the first time, the challenge wasn't whether he could succeed. The challenge was deciding who he wanted to become. Outside his apartment window, the city lights stretched endlessly across the horizon. Somewhere below, ambulances continued moving through the streets. Doctors continued treating patients. Hospitals continued fighting battles invisible to most people. And somewhere ahead, a decision awaited him, one that might shape the rest of his life.